The blizzard had been screaming for 3 days when Caleb found them two bodies half buried at the edge of his property line, skin gone the color of frostbitten steel. Not human. He should have walked away. Then one of them opened her eyes, looked at him, and whispered a word his translator rendered as breeder. He had no idea what he'd just inherited. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy content like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Now back to the video. The cold on Tessavan did not arrive. It was simply there, the way a wall is there, and a man either learned to live pressed against it or he died complaining. Caleb Rohn had stopped complaining 4 winters ago. He moved through the storm dark of his thermal field with the slow, deliberate economy of someone who knew that wasted motion was wasted heat. The crop rows glowed a weak amber beneath their frost shielding, struggling the way everything on this world struggled. His homestead sat alone on a shelf of black rock above a frozen basin, the nearest neighbor a half-day's crawl in good weather, and there had not been good weather in 3 days. The blizzard had been screaming since the second moon rose. It screamed still. He had come out to check the eastern shield line. That was all. A practical errand at the edge of a practical life. He almost walked past him. The shapes lay half buried near his property marker, and his first thought was that a hauler had shed cargo in the wind. Then the wind shifted the snow off the nearer one, and Caleb saw a hand. Long-fingered, wrong-jointed. The skin had gone the gray-blue of frostbitten steel, and it was not a human hand. He stood over them for a long moment while the storm tried to take the warmth out of his lungs. Two of them, both alien, both female by the look of it, both stripped down to thin underlayers that no creature alive could survive this cold in. No gear, no survival kit, no emergency beacon. He had lived on the frontier long enough to read a scene, and this scene told him plainly that these two had not crashed here. They had been placed here. Someone had brought them to the most lethal patch of nothing in the sector, taken everything that might keep them breathing, and left them for the world to do the quiet work. Report it, the frontier law said. Off-world bodies, you log them and you wait for the circuit marshal. The marshal was 11 days out. These two would be frozen statues in 11 hours. Caleb crouched. He pressed 2 fingers to the throat of the nearer one, found a spot where a pulse should be on a human, and felt nothing, and then, faint and slow as a dying engine, a flutter. Alive. Barely. He checked a second. The same. 2 threads of life, both fraying. He could still walk away. The thought was there, honest and ugly, and he looked at it the way he looked at everything squarely. Walking away cost him nothing. Taking them in could cost him everything, because people did not get abandoned on ice worlds by accident, and whoever had done this would want it to stay done. Then the wind came down to a brief, strange lull, and in that pocket of silence, the nearer alien's eyes opened. They found him, pale, lucid, impossibly aware for someone that close to the end. Her cracked lips moved. His translator caller caught it, processed it, and rendered the word into his ear in a flat, synthetic murmur. Breeder. Then her eyes rolled back, and the storm came roaring in again. Caleb did not know what the word meant. He knew only that he was not going to stand on a frozen shelf and watch 2 living things die at his feet because dying was the convenient thing for them to do. He got an arm under the first one. She weighed almost nothing, lighter than a human her size had any right to be, and that frightened him more than weight would have. It meant her body had already started burning itself for fuel. He carried her through the screaming dark to the cabin, kicked the thermal door, laid her on the floor by the heat core, then he went back out into it for the second. The trek back the second time was worse. The cold had found the sweat on his spine and turned it to wire, but he made the door, and he made it inside, and he sealed the storm out behind him. Then the work began. He stripped the frozen underlayers. He packed warmed gel wraps along the great arteries, the way the colony medtech said to, throat and wrists, and the hollows of the hips. And he did it for 2 bodies built subtly wrong, and he did not let himself think past the next task. Their skin began slowly, to lose the steel color, slowly, hours of it. The heat core roared and the storm answered, and Caleb knelt between two aliens on his own floor and willed warmth back into things that the universe had decided should be cold. The younger looking one came back first. It happened fast. One breath she was a body, and the next she was a coiled, panicked animal. Her eyes snapped open, found a human face above her, and read it as the last thing in a long line of things that had tried to kill her. Her hand shot up. The edge of it caught Caleb across the throat, hard enough to put him on his back, and then she was on him, forearm crushing down, a sound coming out of her that the translator did not even try to shape into a word. "I'm not," Caleb got out. He did not fight her. That was instinct too, the same one that had made him carry her. A thrashing thing fought harder. "I pulled you out of the snow." She did not understand the words, but she understood maybe that he had not raised a hand, that the room was warm, that she was not dead. The fight drained out of her all at once, the way it does when a body remembers how empty it is, and she sagged sideways off him and did not get up. Caleb lay on his own floor, breathing, the print of her arm hot across his windpipe. He had wanted, for 4 quiet winters, for the universe to leave him alone. Whoever these two were, whatever breeder meant, whatever had been done to them, and by whom, he understood one thing with total clarity as he stared at his own ceiling. It was not going to leave him alone now. The storm broke sometime in the night. Caleb knew because the silence woke him, the sudden absence of the thing that had been screaming against his walls for 3 days. He had fallen asleep sitting up against the heat core, a stripped wrench still in his hand, the way a man sleeps when he expects to be attacked. He had not been attacked, but both of them were watching him. They had moved while he slept. The two aliens had pulled themselves to the far wall, backs to it, shoulder to shoulder, and they sat there with the gel wraps still loose around their wrists and a stillness that was not rest. It was assessment. Caleb had seen predators do it. He had seen survivors do it too, and survivors were worse because survivors had reasons. He did not reach for anything. He set the wrench down slow where they could see it leave his hand. "You're in my house," he said. The translator caller carried it across. "On Tessavin, frontier world. You were in the snow. I brought you in." The older one answered. Her voice had come back rough, but it had come back whole, and the synthetic murmur in his ear shaped her words into something cold and exact. "We know where we are. We were meant to die here." I gathered that. "Then you understand what you have done by stopping it." He did not, fully. But he understood enough to know it was a warning and not a thank you, and he let it sit. The hours after that were a slow, careful negotiation, conducted mostly in silence. Caleb made broth from his own stores because their bodies needed fuel and he had nothing else to offer. The younger one, the one who had put him on his back, would not touch it until the older one drank first. And the older one drank first like a woman checking a current before she let her sister into the water. The translator gave Caleb their names eventually, drop into the quiet like coins onto a counter. The elder was Vireni, the younger was Isa. It was Isa who talked. Vireni gave nothing away that she did not first decide to give. Isa leaked truth around the edges because she was younger, or warmer, or simply too tired to hold the same hard line. "You carried us both," Isa said at one point, watching him work the heat core's regulator. It was not quite a question. Wasn't going to carry one and leave the other. She looked at him for a long moment after the translator finished, and something moved behind her face that he could not read. The friction came, when it came, from the machine between them. The translator collar was a colony-issue unit built for trade pigeon and supply manifests, and it had not been built for whatever the sisters spoke. It dropped words. It guessed. And when Vireni said something to Isa, low, not meant for him, the collar caught the one piece it had a match for and fed it into Caleb's ear anyway. Breeder. The same word. The dying word from the snow. Caleb set down the regulator. "That word," he said. "You said it when I found you. She just said it now. My unit keeps giving it to me, and I don't think it's giving it to me right. Silence. Issa's eyes went to her sister. Vareni held Caleb's gaze with an expression like a closed door. Your machine is translating a concept it has no shape for, Vareni said finally. It is reaching for the nearest word in your tongue. The nearest word is a poor one? Then give me the real one. No. Flat. Not yet. You are owed an explanation. You are not owed it on your schedule, human, while we are still deciding whether keeping us alive was mercy or merely a different kind of cage. It should have angered him. It didn't quite. He recognized the shape of it. He had spoken to people that way himself. Back when he still had things worth guarding, he let it go. But Issa, when Vareni had turned to study the sealed window, said quietly enough that the caller almost missed it. It isn't an insult. The word, whatever it sounded like to you. I want you to know that, at least. There is more to it than you think, much more, and when she tells you, you will understand why she is being careful with it. Careful with the word, or careful with me. Issa didn't answer that, which was an answer. By the second day, they could stand. By the third, they could move without the gel wraps, and that changed the air in the cabin because two things that could not move were guests, and two things that could were a situation. Caleb watched them rebalance to it. He watched Vareni map his single room the way he'd mapped that scene in the snow exits, tools, the cabinet where the cutting gear lived, the distance from the heat core to the door. So he laid down the rules of his house. He did it plainly, the way he did everything. You're welcome to the warmth and the food until you're strong enough to figure your next move, he said. My terms are simple. You don't go through my stores without asking. You don't touch the long-range set on the east wall. That's my only link out, and I'm not having it lit up by whoever's hunting you. And if trouble comes to my door because of you, you tell me before it arrives, not after. Vareni listened to all of it. When the translator finished, she inclined her head, a small, precise motion, almost royal, though he had no word for it yet. Reasonable terms, she said. We accept them. But Caleb caught the look that passed between the sisters as she said it. Issa would not meet his eyes. And Vareni's agreement had come a half-beat too smooth, the way a person agrees to a thing whose true cost the other party has not yet been told. He had asked them to warn him before trouble arrived. Neither of them had said a word about how much was already on its way. The truth came on the fifth day, and it came because Vareni decided it would not, because Caleb pried it loose. He had stopped trying. He had learned in 5 days that the elder sister gave ground only on her own terms, and that pushing only made the door close harder. So he waited, and on the fifth morning, with the basin below the cabin glittering hard and blue under a rare, clear sky, Vareni told him who they were. You have been sheltering the Salquaron throne, she said. What is left of it? My sister and I are the last direct heirs of a royal line 900 years unbroken, until our uncle decided it would break with us. Caleb absorbed that the way he absorbed most things, without his face moving much. Royalty. He had pulled royalty out of a snowdrift and fed it his own broth. It should have felt absurd. It mostly felt like the other shoe finally hitting the floor. Your uncle, he said. The one who left you here. Coordinator Tha Dun. The translator gave the name a flat weight. Our father's brother. When our father died, the line passed to us. Thadun held the regency, a caretaker's seat, meant to be temporary. He found he liked the shape of the chair, so he arranged for the two obstacles between him and a permanent throne to suffer an accident on a world no one would think to search. An accident that leaves no marks, Caleb said. No wreck, no bodies anyone finds. Just two royals who went exploring and never came back. You read it correctly in the snow. You have read it correctly since. It was Issa who told him the rest, the part Vareni's voice went careful around. And it was the part that finally explained a word. Their species was dying. Not in war, not in famine. In something slower and crueler than either. The Salquaran royal line and, Issa explained, their people more broadly could only continue through a narrow band of genetic compatibility, a matching that had once been common and over the long centuries had grown rare. rarer each generation. Couples who could conceive a living child had become a statistical event. The royal house, with its centuries of careful pairing, had run that well nearly dry. Among their own people now, a viable match was almost a myth. It is why the line matters, Issa said. Not for the crown, for the proof. If the heirs survive and the heirs continue, the people believe survival is still possible. If we die without issue, Thaddeus does not just win a throne. He inherits the last years of a species that has quietly agreed to stop. Caleb sat with that. The heat core ticked. Outside, the clear sky was already hazing over again. Tessavin never let a man enjoy good weather long. That's a heavy thing, he said. I'm sorry for it. I don't see what it has to do with the word your machine keeps putting in my ear. The sisters looked at each other. This time it was Vireni who said it, because Vireni had decided the careful part was over. When you carried us in, our biological readers were still active under our skin, dormant, but logging. They scanned a creature handling us. They scanned you. We have both seen the result. She paused. The translator held the pause. Your genome, human, returns a compatibility index we did not believe existed. Not high, near perfect. A match cleaner than anything recorded in our own population in 4 generations. The cabin was very quiet. The word your unit keeps reaching for, Vireni went on, is not an insult, and it is not a crude thing, whatever it sounded like in your tongue. In ours, it is closer to lineage bearer, one through whom a dying line might not die. When Isa woke in the snow and saw your face, half frozen and certain she was dead, that was the word her body offered her. Not enemy, not stranger, hope. The cruelest possible kind, because she did not even know yet if she would live to use it. Caleb stood up. He did it slowly, and he walked to the sealed east window, and he looked out at the basin for a while before he said anything. When he did, his voice was level, but it was the levelness of a man holding something down. Let me make sure I have it, he said. Your people are ending. Your uncle wants the ending to be permanent and quiet. You two are the only thing standing in the way of that, and I, by some accident of how I'm built, am the only thing standing in the way of you being a dead end. He turned around. So when you say you accepted my house terms a little too easily, it's because you weren't planning to be guests passing through. You were measuring whether the man whose floor you woke up on was also the solution to your succession problem. Neither of them denied it. We measured, Vireni said. We did not decide. There is a difference, and I will hold to it. You are owed that. Here's what I'll tell you both, once, plainly. Caleb's jaw was tight. I pulled you out of the snow because you were dying and I had hands. That's the whole of it. I am not a thread in your bloodline. I am not the answer to a crisis 900 years in the making. I am a man with a failing crop and a cold house, and I did not agree to be anyone's last hope. The words landed hard. Issa flinched from them. Vireni did not. Vireni only watched him, and when she answered, there was something almost like respect in the cold of it. Good, she said. A man who wanted the role could not be trusted with it. Your refusal is the first thing about you that has made me feel we might survive you. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. And far above Tessavin's hazing sky, though none of the 3 of them knew it yet, a ship had already dropped out of the dark to confirm a job that someone believed was finished. The warning came on a sled. Caleb heard the engine before he saw it. The rough, coughing note of a supply runner pushed harder than its age wanted to go. And he was at the east window with the long range set deliberately untouched and a hand near the cutting gear before the machine crested the basin. Rim. He knew the sled. He knew the shape hunched over its controls. Marn Coletti, his nearest neighbor, did not visit. Marn Coletti sent manifests and traded parts at the relay drop and otherwise left Caleb to his cold quiet, which was exactly why a Marn Coletti driving through bad light meant something had gone wrong. Inside, Caleb said to the sisters, without turning. Back room, now. Don't make a sound. They moved. Whatever else the last days had been, the sisters had stopped arguing with that particular tone. By the time Marn's sled hissed down outside the thermal door, the cabin held one man and a wrench and nothing else worth noticing. Marn came in on a gust of cold. He was a wide, gray, weather-cured old man, and he did not waste time on the door being open too long. "You got eyes on the old relay station lately?" he said. "Not since the storm." "Then you don't know two off-world ships set down out past it. Black hulls, no trade markings, no transponder squawk." Marn's eyes were doing the thing Caleb's did reading the room, finding it too clean, came in low, came in quiet. Started knocking on homesteads, Roan. Polite knocking, asking real friendly whether anybody'd seen anything come down during the blow. "Did they knock on you?" "They did." Marn held his gaze. "I told them I'd seen snow. Lots of it. They thanked me and moved on to the next shelf." He let a beat go by. "I've been on this rock 20 years. I know what a search team looks like when it's lying about being a survey crew. Whatever they're hunting, they think it's still alive, and they want it not to be. And Caleb said nothing for a moment. It would have been easy to keep saying nothing, but Marn had driven through bad light to bring him this, and a man did not do that for a neighbor he intended to sell out. "Thanks for the word," Caleb said. "I'll keep my head down." Marn looked at him a long moment longer. He looked at the two broth bowls drying on the rack that Caleb had forgotten to put away. He did not say anything about them. He was old enough and frontier enough to know that some questions were a kindness left unasked. "Keep it real far down," Marn said, and went back out into the cold. When the sled's note had faded off the basin, Caleb opened the back room. The sisters were already out of it. "You heard," he said. "All of it," Vireni answered. The translator carried the grimness clean. "Black hulls, no markings. That is Dren's hand. Thaddeus confirmation squad. They are not assassins in the ordinary sense, they are auditors. They were sent to verify a death, and they are too thorough to simply file the report. They will sweep every shelf in this sector until they have stood over our bodies or proven we are not on this world." "How long before they get to this one?" "Days. Perhaps fewer. They are working the homesteads in a pattern." Vireni's voice did not rise, but it sharpened. "When they reach yours, a cold house with a man living alone will not satisfy them. They will look. They look well." Caleb crossed to the cabinet, opened it, started taking stock not of weapons, he had almost none, but of positions, sight lines, the blind angle behind the heat core, the crawl space under the floor plating where he stored seed against a bad season. He had spent 4 winters making this cabin a fortress against cold. He began quietly to think of it as a fortress against people. And here was the thing that surprised him. The sisters did the same. He had braced somewhere in the back of his mind for 2 royals who would need protecting soft things from a soft world who had survived the snow only because he'd hauled them out of it. That was not what moved through his cabin now. Isa had the floor plating up and was reading the crawl space the way a soldier reads cover. Vireni had taken the cutting gear apart, found the components she wanted, and was reassembling them into something that was no longer cutting gear. Her wrong-jointed fingers fast and certain. "You two aren't what I thought I pulled out of the snow," Caleb said. Isa glanced up. There was almost a smile in it. "Heirs of a hunted line don't stay heirs by being decorative. Our uncle has been trying to make us dead since we were children. We learned the shape of staying alive a long time ago." The almost smile faded. "What we couldn't do was survive that cold with no gear. That part that we genuinely could not have done without you." It was the first time the cooperation went both directions, and all 3 of them felt it. Caleb knew his ground. The sisters knew their hunters. He sealed the window blinds and reinforced the door brace. Vireni walked him through how Dren's hand searched the structure, what they checked first, what tells they looked for. Isa rigged the crawl space so 2 people could go silent under the floor in under 10 seconds. Nobody called it trust. Nobody had to. It was just 3 people who had, for the moment, the same problem, building the same wall against it. When the work was done, the cabin looked to a casual eye, exactly as poor and exactly as empty as it had the day before. Caleb stood in the middle of it as the light failed outside. Days, he said quietly. Maybe fewer. Maybe fewer, Vareni agreed. None of them slept much. And somewhere out past the old relay station, under the black hulls, the auditors marked another shelf cleared and turned methodically toward the next. The whiteout bought them time, and the whiteout took it back as boredom and closeness, which were their own kind of pressure. It rolled in the second night after Marn's warning, a true Tessavan whiteout, the kind that did not scream like the first storm but simply erased the world, basin and sky and the difference between them until the cabin was a lit box floating in nothing. Nothing could move in it, not a sled, not a search team, not three people with somewhere to be. Dren's hand was pinned to whatever shelf they'd reached, and so was everyone else. So the three of them sat inside the lit box, and the days stacked up, and the walls did what walls do to people who cannot leave them. Caleb worked, because working was how he held a day together. He stripped and cleaned every system in the cabin twice. The sisters watched him do it the first time and helped the second, and somewhere in there the helping stopped being strategy and started being something closer to company. It was Isa who crossed the distance first. She found him at the heat core on the third shut-in night, both of them awake because Vareni had finally slept and the cabin was quiet enough to talk in. Isa sat down across the core from him, drew her knees up, and for a while said nothing at all. "You live alone," she said eventually, "truly alone, not waiting on anyone, not grieving toward anyone. I have been trying to understand it. It's not complicated. Everyone I had is gone. The math of that is just quiet." "Gone how?" he told her. Not all of it, and not fast, but he told her the colony ship his family had been on, the failed thermal contract, the bad winter that the homestead survived, and the people in it did not. He had not said it out loud in 4 years. It came out flat because flat was the only way he could carry it, and Isa did not flinch from the flatness the way her sister hadn't flinched from his refusal. "My mother was killed when I was 11, she said, when he was done. By people Thadden paid and never met. Vareni was 14. She decided that day that she would feel things later, when it was safe, and there has never been a later. I went the other way. I decided that if I stopped feeling things, I would just be a smaller version of the thing trying to kill us." She looked at him across the warm light. "You and I made the same choice, I think, to stay a person. It costs more, but I think it costs the right things." Caleb didn't answer right away. The honest truth was that no one had looked at the shape of his grief and named it a choice before, let alone called it the right one. "Maybe," he said, "it was as much as he had. It was enough. Something settled between them that night that was not strategy and was not the bloodline and was not the word the translator kept reaching for. It was just two people who had each decided, alone, to stay soft in a hard place, recognizing it in each other. Vireni saw it. Vireni saw everything. She said nothing the next day, but Caleb caught the watching. The elder sister had a way of being entirely still while she calculated. And she was calculating now, her pale eyes moving between him and Isa as though rechecking a sum she did not like the look of. When she finally spoke to him about it, it was oblique and it was cold, and it was, he understood later, honest in the only register she had. "My sister sees a man," Vireni said. They were alone. Isa was in the back room. "I want you to know that I see one too. I am not blind to it. But I also see a line 900 years long, and a species deciding whether to continue, and I cannot afford to see you the way she does. I see what you are to that." Isa would call that cold. A pause. Isa would be right. But cold is what has kept the line breathing this long. "You think I'd choose her over you?" Caleb said slowly. "And you're telling me ahead of time that it can't be a choice like that?" "I am telling you," Vireni said, "that there are two of us, and one of you, and a future that needs more arithmetic than feeling." That is all I am telling you, for now." End of quote. It was not jealousy. It was too controlled to be jealousy. But Caleb stood in his own cabin and felt for the first time the precise shape of the thing the title of his situation had promised from the start: two sisters, the same man, and a question none of them had agreed to ask out loud yet. Issa wanted him to be a person. Vireni needed him to be a solution, and both of those wantings had his name on them. The whiteout broke on the sixth day, and the world came back. And with it came Marn Coletti's sled, and this time Marn did not knock politely or leave questions unasked. He came through the door, looked at the two aliens standing openly in Caleb's cabin because there had been no time to hide them, and his weathered face did not register shock so much as a grim confirmation. "Knew it," Marn said. "Two broth bowls. Cold house. You're a bad liar when you forget to do the dishes, Roan." He set his jaw. Those black hulls finished the far shelves. They're coming inward. Days, like I said, and now I find out my neighbor's been hiding exactly what they're tearing the sector apart to find. He looked hard at Caleb. "So you're going to tell me what I've already got my boots in. All of it. Because I'm in it now, whether you talk or not, and I'd rather be in it knowing." The whiteout had given them 6 days. It had not given them a single day more. Caleb told him. All of it: the snow, the sisters, Thadden, the dying line, the word the translator kept reaching for. He told it flat and complete in the middle of his own cabin while Marn Coletti stood by the door with snow melting off his shoulders and his face going harder with every piece. When Caleb finished, Marn was quiet for a long moment. "A succession war," the old man said, "on my shelf of nowhere, over a throne I'll never see." He looked at the sisters, then back at Caleb. "And you couldn't just leave him in the snow?" "No," Caleb said. "I couldn't." Marn exhaled through his nose. "No," he agreed, grim. "Reckon you couldn't. That's the trouble with you, Roan." He didn't say it unkindly. He crossed to the east window, looked out at the basin, and started, without being asked, to talk through what he knew about the search pattern, because Marn Coletti, it turned out, was the kind of man who, once he was in a thing, was in it. They did not get to finish the conversation. Dren's hand did not announce itself. There was no engine note this time, no polite knock. The first any of them knew was the heat course regulator light stuttering a hairline drop in the cabin's external power draw. The kind of thing only a man who'd cleaned that system twice in a week would catch, and Caleb said one word: "Down." And the cabin's whole careful architecture of the last days went live at once. Issa had the floor plating up before the word finished. Vireni killed the interior lights. Marn, to his credit, did not freeze. He went flat against a blind wall behind the heat core where Caleb pointed, fast for an old man. The door brace held the first hit. It did not hold the second. They came in low and spread, 3 of them, moving with the unhurried economy of people who had done this many times and expected it to go the way it always went. Auditors. They were not loud. They swept the cabin in practiced arcs, and for one breath, Caleb thought the crawl space in the dark might actually be enough. And then a boot caught the edge of the lifted floor plating, and the lead auditor's weapon came around toward the gap where the sisters were. What happened next happened in seconds, and Caleb would turn it over for a long time afterward. He did not have a weapon worth the name. What he had was a cabin he knew in the dark better than the auditors knew it in the light, and a heat core whose manual purge valve he had stripped and cleaned 6 days ago. He hit the purge. A hard gout of superheated vapor slammed sideways across the room, exactly where he'd known it would go, and the lead auditor staggered back from the gap, blind for a heartbeat. And a heartbeat was all the sisters needed. They came up out of the floor together. Caleb had braced some part of him to see 2 royals overwhelmed. That was not what came up out of the floor. Issa took the blinded auditor low and fast and certain, and Vireni's reassembled not a cutting tool found the second one before he'd fully turned, and the thing Caleb understood in that moment was that the sisters had not been hiding because they were helpless. They had been hiding because 3 trained killers in the open was bad math, and the instant the math changed, so did they. But there were 3 auditors, and a third one was not blinded, and a third one read the room and made the correct cold choice. Not the aliens. The man. Killed a man whose cabin this was, and the shelter, the supply, the local knowledge all died with him. Caleb saw it coming the way he saw weather coming. He moved not fast enough to avoid it, just fast enough to make it not be fatal. The shot took him through the side, high, a line of white fire across the ribs, and it put him down against the heat core with a breath knocked clean out of him. He heard, dimly, the sound the cabin made after that. He heard Isa make a sound that was not a word. She crossed the room. The third auditor was good, and the third auditor still did not last, because something had gone out of Isa's careful, survival-trained economy, and something else had come into it, and Vereni was a half step behind her the whole way. It was over in seconds. The cabin went still and full of vapor, and the only sound was Caleb trying to get air back into a body that had decided to stop cooperating. Isa was on her knees beside him before Vereni had finished checking the auditors were down. Her hands were at the wound, fast, and her face was not careful anymore. It was open all the way down, and what was open in it frightened Caleb more than the shot had. "You moved into it," she said. "You saw it coming, and you moved into it." "Moved enough," he managed. "Still here." Vereni knelt on his other side. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the wound, and she looked at his face, and whatever arithmetic the elder sister had been running since the whiteout, Caleb watched a piece of it change. Not soften, exactly, but change. "You are a fool," she said. "You had a clear angle to the back room. You chose the shot instead." "You were both in the open," Caleb said. Math changed. Vereni was quiet, then very low. "Yes, it did. But the cabin was wrecked, the door was breached, the heat core was bleeding pressure, and 3 black-holed auditors on the floor meant a fourth thing somewhere knew exactly where they were the moment the check-in went silent." Marn came out from behind a core, looked at the ruin of it, and said what all of them already knew. "You can't stay here," the old man said. "None of you. Not anymore." And then Marn told them the rest what he was. Before Tessavin, what he used to be, and what he was about to do to buy them the time to run. Marn Coletti had been coalition military once, 20 years and a lifetime ago. Before the frontier, before the gray and the supply runs, he'd been the kind of soldier whose job was holding a position so other people could leave it. He told them this fast, in the wreck of the cabin, while Vereni packed the wound in Caleb's side and Isa stripped the dead auditors of anything that would keep 3 people alive on open ice. "There's a 4th ship," Marn said. "Has to be. These 3 checked in on a schedule, and that schedule just went quiet. Whoever's running them will send the rest to the last known coordinates here." He looked at the breached door. "So here is where I'll be. Sleds faster than anything on foot. I draw them off my way, you go yours. Old relay station. It's got a long-range set with the reach to punch a signal off-world, if anybody out there is still listening for you." "That's not a plan," Caleb said. "That's you standing in a doorway. It's a supply runner who knows this basin better than anything with a black hull ever will, leading a search team in circles in bad light." Marn's weathered face did not move. "I've held doorways before, Roan. I'm good at it. And I'd rather spend the time I've got buying something than waiting on a shelf for it to run out." He didn't let Caleb answer. He just gripped the younger man's shoulder once, hard, said, "Get them to the station," and went out to his sled. The engine note faded west. The 3 of them went east, into the open ice, on foot. The trek was the worst thing Caleb had done in a world that specialized in worse things. Tessavan's basin had no mercy in it and no features to break the cold's run at them, just blue-white distance and wine that found every seam and a sky the color of old metal. They moved into Auditor's stripped thermal layers, which were better than anything Caleb owned and still not enough. The wound in his side turned every breath into a negotiation. Vereni rationed the dead men's field stims and the dead men's rations with a brutal arithmetic, and she did not pretend the arithmetic was kind. They walked. They walked until walking was the only verb any of them had left, and then they made cold camp in the lee of a pressure ridge and walked again. And on the ice, with nothing to do but move and no walls to hold the words in, the three of them finally said the things the cabin had kept stacking up. Vireni said hers on the second night, with Caleb's side aching and Isa half asleep against the ridge wall. "You think the throne is the point?" she said. "You said as much the day I told you who we were. A man with a failing crop, refusing to be the answer to a succession crisis. You meant it as contempt for the crown. I have let you keep that because it was useful that you not want the thing." She watched the dark. "But the crown is not the point. The crown is a chair. The point is that there are children in the Salquaran territories right now being told gently by their parents that they are the last of something, that after them is quiet. The line surviving is the only argument anyone has left that the quiet is not certain. That is what I am carrying across this ice. Human, not a chair. An argument against an entire people giving up." Caleb was quiet a long time. "You should have led with that," he said finally. "Back in the cabin. It's a better argument than the genetics." "You would not have been ready for it in the cabin," Vireni said. "You are barely ready for it now." She was right. He didn't say so. Isa said hers on the third night, when Vireni had taken the watch and walked the perimeter of their cold camp, and it was just the two of them again the way it had been at the heat core. "My sister told you what she wants from you," Isa said. "I heard her. The line. The argument. The future that needs arithmetic." She pulled her knees up. "I am not going to dress mine in a cause. I want you to live. That is the whole of it, and it is not strategic. And Vireni would tell you it is a weakness, and she might be right. When that shot took you, the thing in me that broke was not the line is at risk. It was him. Isa. Let me finish, because I am only going to say it once on this ice." She looked at him. "There are two of us. You know that. You have known it since the snow, since the word. I am not going to pretend the other side of this isn't there, or that my sister isn't real, or that any of this is simple. But I am also not going to let the cold and the running make me a coward about it. So, whatever this becomes, whatever you decide, when there is room to decide anything, I want you to know it was a true thing and not a thing the situation built. The choice is yours. I only needed you to know it was a real choice. Both of us did." The wind ran over the ridge above them, and Caleb, for the first time since a hand had come out of a snowdrift the color of frostbitten steel, stopped running from the question. He didn't answer it. There was no room yet to answer it, and answering it badly, on open ice, would have been its own kind of cruelty. But he stopped fleeing it, stopped treating two sisters as a situation that had happened to him, and started quietly asking his own questions about the line, about the argument against the quiet, about the warm thing with Isa and the cold true thing with Vireni, and what a man owed to either when he had not asked for either. On the fourth day, through the metal haze, they saw it. The old relay station, a dark cluster of structures on the basin's far rim, antenna masts still standing against the sky, and there were lights on inside it, which meant it was not empty. The lights in the relay station belonged to the Salquaran remnant. Caleb did not know that yet when they crossed the last stretch of basin, half frozen and out of rations and out of distance. He only knew that figures had come out of the dark structures to meet them, and that the figures had stopped dead at the sight of two women whose faces they knew from coins, from broadcasts, from 900 years of a line they had been told was finally, quietly over. There were perhaps 30 of them inside, loyalists, scattered survivors of the old royal household, off-worlders who had refused Thaddeus' regency, a handful who had simply never stopped believing. They had been using the dead relay station as a waypoint for years, somewhere to gather, to pass word, to keep a flame lit that most of them no longer expected to feed anything. And now the heirs had walked in out of a blizzard, alive, with a wounded human. It should have been a homecoming. It was not cleanly. Caleb watched it split them down the middle within the hour. Some of the remnant looked at Vireni and Isa and saw exactly what Vireni had carried across the ice, an argument against the quiet, proof the line was not done. Those ones wept, or knelt, or simply stood very still with something working behind their faces. But others looked at the same two women, and then at the human standing wounded beside them, and Caleb saw their faces due to cold arithmetic he had come to recognize. Two princesses thought dead, returned. A succession crisis suddenly unresolved. And at the center of it, threaded straight through the bloodline's only future, an off-worlder, a complication, a thing their enemies could use as easily as their friends. "They're not all glad to see you," Caleb said quietly to Vereni, watching a knot of older loyalists talk low in a corner. "No," Vireni agreed. "Some of them made their peace with the line ending. A man who has finished grieving a thing does not always thank you for telling him it is not dead. And some of them are simply afraid. We did not come back alone. We came back with you, and they do not yet know what you are." She paused. "Neither entirely do I." It was Issa who said the harder thing. "And one of them," she said low, "is talking to Thaddeus." She had no proof yet, only the instinct of someone who had survived to adulthood by reading rooms. But the instinct was not wrong. Within 2 days of the sisters' arrival, it surfaced a junior member of the Remnant, a quartermaster who handled the station's only offworld.com link, caught sending a burst transmission on a frequency he had no reason to use. He did not deny it long. He had not even done it for cruelty in the end. He had done it because Tadden's people had reached his family back into territories, and the price of their safety was a single piece of information. The heirs are alive and here. The Remnant wanted to deal with the informant their own way. Caleb watched Vereni stop them, not from mercy from arithmetic, the cold kind he'd stopped underestimating. "He has already sent it," she said. "Killing him unsends nothing, and a frightened man who is allowed to live is sometimes useful twice." The informant was confined. The damage was done. Because the damage was this. Thadden now knew. Not a rumor, not a maybe, a confirmed location. Dren's hand had gone quiet at Caleb's cabin, and now the man who had ordered 2 royals erased knew the erasure had failed, and knew exactly which dark cluster of structures on which frozen rim to aim everything he had at. And here was where Caleb stopped being a bystander. He had spent 8 parts of this telling himself a version of the same sentence: "I am a man with a failing crop. I did not agree to be anyone's last hope." He had carried that sentence out of the snow, through the cabin, across the ice. It had been true. It had also, somewhere on that basin, stopped being the whole truth. So when the Remnant gathered in the station's cold central hall to argue about what came next, some for scattering again, some for hiding the sisters deeper, some simply paralyzed, Caleb did a thing he had not done since the colony ship. He stood up in a room full of people and chose a side out loud. "You're arguing about how to hide them better?" he said, and the translator carried it across the hall. "You can't. Your own man already told Thaddeus where the flame is. Hiding's over. The only question left is whether the next time these two are seen, it's by your enemies standing over their bodies or by your own people alive on a broadcast Thadden can't bury." The hall was quiet. It was Vireni who picked it up. Vireni, who had spent the whole journey insisting on cold arithmetic, looking at the human who had just done the arithmetic for her. "He's right," she said. "Thadden's claim survives on one thing, that we are dead and the line is finished. It does not survive us being seen, not by him, by the territories, by the children being told they are the last of something." She turned to the divided Remnant. "We do not run again. We make them look at us. We use this station's mast, the reach Marn sent us here for, and we put the heirs of the Sol Quaron line in front of their own people, alive, before Thaddeus' ships, make sure no one ever can again." It was not a safe plan. Every person in the cold hall knew it. To broadcast was to stand still, deliberately, at the exact coordinates their enemy was already burning toward, to trade hiding for being seen, and gamble that being seen was the stronger weapon. But it was a plan, and as the Remnant began, slowly, to move toward it, Caleb felt the last of his old sentence go quiet in his chest. He was not a bystander to this anymore. He had picked it up, and somewhere out in the dark, Thaddeus had already begun moving everything he had toward the rim. Thaddeus did not send Dren's hand this time. Dren's hand had gone quiet at a homestead and never reported in, and the coordinator was not a man who repeated a method that had failed. He came himself. The remnant's instruments caught the ships dropping out of the dark a full day before they reached the rim, not the Black Auditor hulls now, but a strike contingent, and at the center of it, a command vessel flying the coordinator's own colors. Issa read the formation and said what it meant in 3 words. He's committing everything. Thaddeus had learned the heirs were alive and broadcasting soon, and he had done the same arithmetic Caleb had done in the cold hall. Once the territory saw the sisters live, his throne was sand. So he would not let them be seen. He would erase the station, the remnant, the signal, and the bloodline in one strike and absorb whatever it cost because the alternative cost him everything. That gave the relay station 1 day. They spent it the way the cabin had taught Caleb to spend time, turning a place you could not leave into a place that could be defended. The remnant had old hands among them, household guard and off-world fighters, and they knew their work. But it was Caleb who knew the architecture of a siege from the inside of a breach cabin, and it was the sisters who knew precisely how their uncle thought. The 3 of them had done this before, smaller, and they did it again, larger, and the doing of it had a grim familiarity. Now, the plan held 2 halves. The remnant and Caleb would hold the station's outer structures, the doors, the approaches, the long cold corridors for as long as the mast needed. And the mast needed time because the broadcast was the actual battle. Everything else was just buying the seconds for it. The strike hit at first light in the metal-colored dawn. Caleb had been in one fight in his life that mattered, in his own cabin, and it had lasted seconds. This one did not last seconds. It came in waves against the outer doors, and the remnant met it, and Caleb met it beside them not because anyone had made him, but because he had stood up in a cold hall and chosen this, and a chosen thing has to be carried all the way. The wound in his side was a live coal the whole time. He held a corridor anyway, with a salvaged auditor's weapon and a layout he had walked 40 times in the dark, and the old instinct that had once made a homestead survive a winter that killed its people made him, now, very hard to push out of a doorway. The remnant paid for the time. Caleb saw it. He saw loyalists go down holding lines they had chosen as deliberately as he had chosen his people who had made peace with the line ending and then, given one more chance to feed the flame, had spent themselves feeding it. He did not look away from it. He had decided, on the ice, to stay a person. Staying a person meant the cost landed on you, and you let it. And while the outer structures bled for seconds, the sisters spent those seconds the way the whole plan had always meant them to be spent. They did not hide behind a broadcast. Caleb had half expected the plan to keep the heirs safe in the station's heart while others died for the signal. That was not what Vireni and Issa did. They took the fight toward their uncle's own contingent, toward the command vessel's landing party, toward Thaddeus himself, because the broadcast was not just images of 2 faces, it was live. It was the heirs of the Salquaran line, on every screen in the territories, walking through fire toward a man who had told an entire people they were the last of something. Vireni had been right in the cold hall. The strongest weapon was being seen, and they made their people watch them be unkillable. Thaddeus, in the end, did not get the clean, cold thing he had built his whole reign on. He got the opposite. He got a confrontation in the open, in the metal light, with the remnant's instruments carrying it out to the dark, his 2 nieces, the ones he had stripped of gear and left in a snowfield to be quietly subtracted, standing in front of him, alive, while their own people watched. He had wanted them to be a silence. They made him stand in front of a broadcast and be exposed as the man who had tried to author that silence. When it ended, it did not end with an execution. Caleb noted that later and understood it. Vireni could have killed her uncle. The cold arithmetic might even have argued for it. But a body could be made a martyr, a story Thadden's remaining loyalists could reshape. A broken man, disarmed, exposed in front of the entire territories as exactly what he was, a usurper who had murdered for a chair and failed that could not be reshaped. Thadden was taken. His contingent, watching their coordinator stand revealed and beaten on every screen they had, lost the thing that had held them, the belief that he would win, and that winning was clean. The strike broke, not cleanly, not without cost. And the cost had a name. When the outer structures finally went quiet, word came in from the Western Basin, relayed, and days-old Marn Coletti's sled had led a search team a long way from a frozen rim, through bad light, in circles, exactly as he'd promised. It had bought every hour it was meant to buy. The old soldier had held his doorway. He had not walked back out of it. Caleb stood in the cold corridor he had held, and let that land on him, and did not look away from it. The relay station was scarred, and the remnant was smaller, and a good man on the far side of the basin had spent the last thing he had. But the mast still stood. The broadcast had gone out, and across the Salquaran territories, in 1,000 places where children had been told they were the last of something, people had just watched a line walk through fire and live. The aftermath did not arrive like a victory. It arrived like weather clearing slow and from many directions at once, and only recognizable as relief once you had been standing in it a while. The broadcast had done what Vireni said it would. Across the Salquaran territories, the image had landed and could not be unlanded. 2 heirs, named dead, walking through fire alive, and a coordinator exposed on every screen as the man who had tried to author their silence. Thaddeun's regime did not fall in an afternoon. It came apart over weeks. Loyalists peeling away once the belief that held them was gone, regional administrators quietly deciding they had always supported the line, the machinery of a usurpation losing the one thing it had ever run on. Thaddeun himself was held to answer to his own people, in the open, the way he had never let anything be done in the open. There would be a long reckoning, but the quiet he had tried to build was over, and the line had a future again. That was the thing the territories actually cared about, not the chair, the argument. The heirs lived. The proof that the species' long surrender was not certain stood upright and breathing on a frozen rim, and people who had been telling their children they were the last of something now had to tell them something else. Caleb stood in the scarred relay station and watched all of it resolve, and felt, mostly, the absence of Marn Coletti. The old soldier had no body to recover and no grave on the basin. What he had was an empty doorway on the western shelf and a sled that never came back, and the plain fact that 3 people had crossed the ice alive because one man had decided he would rather spend his time buying something than waiting on it to run out. Caleb did not look away from that. He had decided somewhere out on the ice to stay a person, and staying a person meant Marn's cost was his to carry, and he carried it. The sisters let him have the grief. And then, when the weather of the aftermath had cleared enough that there was finally room, the room Isa had promised would come, on the ice they did the thing the whole journey had been moving toward. They laid it out plainly, both of them, together. There is no more running, Vireni said. They were in the station's central hall, the 3 of them, the remnant elsewhere, and the territories. A problem for tomorrow. No more hunters, no more cold arithmetic done at a sprint. Which means the thing my sister and I have both been carrying since the snow no longer has an excuse to stay unspoken. She did not soften it. Vireni had never once softened anything, and Caleb had stopped wanting her to. I told you on the ice what I want. The line, the argument against the quiet. I will not pretend that has changed, but I will tell you the rest of it now, the part the arithmetic was hiding even from me. I do not only want the solution. Somewhere on that basin, I started wanting the man who chose the shot instead of the clear angle to the back room. I resented that. I have stopped resenting it. And I told you mine on the ice, Isa said. That it was a true thing and not a thing the situation built. It still is. The situation is gone now, and the true thing is still here, so I suppose I was right. There was the almost smile, the one from the crawl space, but steadier now. We are not going to pretend we are not both standing here, Caleb. We never could. The title of this whole impossible thing was honest from the start. There are two of us, and one of you, and we both want a future that has you in it. What we are done pretending, Vireni said, is that this is a competition you owe either of us the winning of. It is not. The choice, all of it, the shape of it, whether there is a future here at all, is yours. We only ever needed you to know the choice was real. Both of us did. It was, Caleb thought, the strangest thing that the rivalry between the two sisters, after everything, had come out the far side of the cold, not as jealousy, but as something open and honest and oddly warm. Vireni and Issa stood shoulder to shoulder the way they had sat against the cabin wall on the first day, assessing him, except they were not assessing a resource anymore. They were two people who had each separately decided to want the same man and had decided they would rather be honest with each other about it than let it rot. And Caleb made his choice. Not the way the word in the snow had framed it, not as a breeder, not as the last entry in someone else's bloodline arithmetic, not as a solution to a 900-year problem. He had refused that the day Vireni first explained it, and he refused it still. He made the choice the other way, as a man. As someone who had walked into a blizzard 4 winters into a life he had decided would be solitary and quiet forever, and had walked back out of it carrying two half-frozen strangers, and had not, in the end, been able to put them back down. He chose the future. He chose them, the whole impossible, honest, two sisters in one man shape of it, not because a species needed him to, but because somewhere between the snowfield and the scarred relay station, the solitary, quiet life had stopped being the one he wanted. What he said when he said it, he said quietly, and only the three of them heard it, and it does not need repeating here. The last image is this. 3 people stood at the rim of a frozen basin on a world called Tessavin, a world Caleb had spent 4 winters surviving and never once called anything but cold. The metal-colored sky was clearing. Below them, the ice caught the light, hard and blue and endless, the way it always had. But it did not look like wasteland anymore. It looked like the place a man had found a family he never went looking for. It looked like home. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe.